Welcome. This is Just Human episode 353. Yes, 353. And I'm dropping this episode and it's going to focus on just one thing though. It's going to be focused on the filing I kind of have skipped past because of other things going on in the United States v. James Comey case. And I knew this filing was big and I would have to spend a good amount of time on it, if not a full episode. And that's what's ended up happening is I've spent the full episode on the DOJ's rebuttal or response to James Comey's motion to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution. Now, that's a motion that I knew wasn't going to really work. Those motions never work. But they can be pretty fun to read, and this one was. And Comey's motion, and DOJ's response to it was pretty fun to read. And you guys are probably already familiar with some of what makes it fun to read, which are the exhibits, including Comey's handwritten notes, some emails back and forth with Daniel Richman, person 3 in the indictment, and then Daniel Richman's text message chain with a reporter for the New York Times, Michael Schmidt. Both Comey and Daniel Richman at times use aliases in these exhibits on these communications they're engaging in. And so what I did is I spent about 2 hours plus, a little over 2 hours, going through that filing. And then as we came to the exhibits, as they were presented in the filing, we jump over to the exhibit and take a gander at it. And then I give commentary throughout. And so that's what this episode is going to focus on. I want you to know, though, before we get into it, I want to tell you a few things. One, of course, I want to tell you how you can support the show. It's over at bensandhoneyfarms.com, bootleg products, manly cans. Christmas is coming up, and before that, Thanksgiving. And if you're interested in buying some honey or some goat milk soap or other products, or you want to buy, you can go to Benson Honey Farms for those things. Or if you want some chili or some salsa or some sauces, Bootleg Products has you covered. If you're looking for gifts, Manly Cans is a great place. And if you make purchases at any of those places using my affiliate links, they kick a few dollars my way out of your purchase. Alternatively, if you just want to support my addiction to caffeine, Ko-Fi.com is a great place to do that. Or you can go to justhuman.substack.com, get a monthly subscription or a yearly one, and you can feed my coffee press. You can keep my coffee press filled with delicious coffee so that I have the energy to go through all these documents. And you can also contribute to my Pacer fund because I do spend a lot of time over on Pacer and on Court Listener. And occasionally I have to pay for the documents that I need for this show. Not all the time, but occasionally I do. So really appreciate all of you who support the show, especially those of you who are subscribers on justhuman.substack.com. Thank you very much. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is that over on my Rumble page and on my YouTube, I have been uploading shorter clips, which are typically between 15 and 30 minutes or so. I'm trying to get them a little bit tighter. I think 15 to 20 minutes is kind of ideal, but there's been a lot to talk about and these things need context. But I've done some videos and they're going in the playlist about the grand conspiracy case, which is being assembled in Florida, reportedly. And then some shorter updates on the most recent action on the Comey docket. And end of last week, beginning of this week, there's been some serious action having to do with the filter protocol and the potentially attorney-client privilege material and Comey's motion for disclosure of grand jury materials and proceedings because there may have been some things about those proceedings that were not on the up and up. And if there's evidence to that effect, that could present a basis for Comey to file a motion to dismiss based on things that happened in that grand jury, such as an FBI agent who was tainted by exposure to attorney-client privilege information, presenting that information to the grand jury, and then that leading to them indicting Comey. If Comey's indictment was arrived at by the grand jury even just partially, based on information they shouldn't have had. There was attorney-client privilege communications that was conveyed to them by this now removed FBI agent. Not removed from the FBI, but removed from the Comey case. That's solid grounds for dismissal of the case. And there's been developments of that just today. There was a hearing on it. Today's Monday that I'm recording this. There was a hearing on it today, and the judge ended up deciding, I'm going to go ahead and spoil one of my videos here, my latest update. The judge ended up deciding that, hey, give it to me. Give me the grand jury materials, and I'm going to look at it myself. And Comey team, make a filing telling me exactly what it is you think I'm going to find that you're looking for, that you suspect might be in these materials, and I'm going to look for it. And if I find it, that could be reason for it to all be disclosed to Comey's team. If the judge doesn't find it, it's kind of threat over. The indictment stands, the grand jury proceedings, according to the judge and according to Pam Bondi, based on a filing we looked at a week ago, her new order about Halligan. Then it's on the up and up, and the indictment stands and the case goes forward, danger over as far as that specific threat. And then we get on to the filter protocol. But I've been doing these shorter updates. I've done 3 of those videos today. And instead of piling those into this Just Human episode, I'm just going to ask you to go ahead and look these up and watch them. And this episode is going to focus on this one major filing, which made big news. I feel like in the past, I feel like so far in the month of November, this is the filing that has gotten the most attention. And these are the exhibits that have gotten the most attention in this case. Other than that, I feel like I'm kind of alone in covering the Comey case. I know that I'm not, but I feel like it's not as at the forefront of media coverage and people's minds. It hasn't been as present in their minds and in the news cycle since November 3rd. November 3rd, it had a big splash. But since then, there's been the elections and government shutdown stuff and all sorts of other things going on. So, and today we had J6 pardons. Some other, I say J6 pardons, I mean the fake elector scheme pardons. And there's been some other things, which I have commentary on. There's also stuff about the J6 pipe bomber. And yeah, there's some other things I had thought originally I would put into this episode, but it's going to end up making this episode 3 hours long, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to shift it to episode 354. All right. All that said, there's one more thing that's coming. One more thing. I've, on the advice and consent of Mrs. Human, I have decided to include some bloopers, just like a minute and a half of bloopers to the end of this episode. And it hadn't really occurred to me, but basically every time I go to record, I have a few bloopers in front of the mic, and I end up, just hitting stop recording and then try again. But it happened to be the case that my wife was in her office, which is right over there, and she was giggling at me while I was recording today. And then she suggested, you should keep those in the show and let your audience laugh at you like I'm laughing at you. So after we go through this filing and these exhibits, at the very end of the show, there's a few bloopers, and the dogs feature in them. So, all right, welcome to the show. We're going to go to this indictment. Enjoy. Or indictment, not this indictment. We're going to go to this filing and these exhibits. All right, enjoy. Okay. Among the updates in this episode, which is going to be episode 353, I believe this video will be for, I want to get to something I've kind of put off. And I've put it off because there were other filings I wanted to get to, and there's this whole thing going on, as I've explained in the episode, with the filter protocol and the grand jury stuff, but I've skipped past what really made the biggest splash of news recently, which was prosecution's response to Comey's motion to dismiss based on vindictive and selective prosecution. And the reason it made a big splash is because this is the one, and by big splash, I mean it got a lot of traffic in the media and online because it had all these exhibits. And among those exhibits were text messages from person 3 in the indictment, Daniel Richman, and then also Comey's handwritten notes and some other things. And you saw big accounts trading around those notes and decoding them, or really deciphering them, I should say. And, it was made out to be a really bad thing for Comey. And it may well be. I've looked through all of these exhibits and I've scanned this motion to dismiss, or response to Comey's motion to dismiss, but I haven't gone through it page by page. And I've been saving going through it page by page because there's just been so much else going on other tracks in this case. The unlawful indictment or unlawful appointment of Halligan, and then the other things, the filter protocol and all that. And since I knew this is a long, like it's like 50 something pages, 48 pages. Plus it has these exhibits. I wanted to make sure I could do a reading of it and go page by page and give it the same attention and I guess appreciation that I gave Comey's motion to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution. I want to give the prosecutions, which it says United States, response to that. I want to give it the same respect and appreciation. I mean, I make no secret here where my bias is or where my thinking is. I think that there may be good reason to dismiss this case, but I think that's based on ambiguity of Cruz's questions and errors in the indictment. We may find out that there's problems with the grand jury proceeding. We don't know for sure yet, but there are certainly indications that there could be problems with those. I also think that Comey is not the bad guy that most people and most media characterize him to be. So I'm just being upfront. That's where my biases and my thinking is. However, I'm willing to be proven wrong on that, just like I was willing to be proven wrong on or at least convinced the other way, I should say, not proven wrong. I'm willing to be convinced to the opposite point of view, just like I was on Halligan's appointment. And when we read Comey's original motion here that this is in response to, his motion to dismiss for vindictive and selective prosecution, which was way back. That was motion 59. This response is docket entry number. Yeah, that was docket entry 59. This is docket entry 138. So it was way back. And when we went through that, I remember, or you may remember, that it had either 60 or 80 pages of just Trump tweets and statements and Truth Social posts. And the motion was, I mean, it was an okay read, but it was a lot of narrative, right? And it reminded me of Trump's motion to dismiss on the same basis back in the indictment from Jack Smith that was against him. But within that was a much more substantial argument that there are real problems with this indictment and it should be dismissed. And that's really what I gave attention to. I think this one might be the same, where I don't really see much utility in doing the he said, she said drama. They said more mean things to me than I said about them or whatever. That's all the soap opera of this. And for something to be dismissed based on vindictive and selective prosecution, which, by the way, I believe I covered that motion from Comey in episode 340 something. I'll go back and look and I'll put it somewhere on screen, wherever it is. I'll put it somewhere on screen if you want to go back to that episode. In order for a defendant to prevail on this kind of a motion, it's a really, really big ask. It doesn't get granted very often. It really has to be proven that this specific person was after you, and then also the U.S. attorney who brought it was after you, and then it would have to be the FBI is after. There'd be so many things that you have to prove. You never really see these things prevail. I've never covered a case where I saw it prevail. Not that I've been doing this for decades. I've been doing it for 5 years though, and before that, I was doing it casually just for my own interest, covering various federal court cases. I've seen many motions to dismiss based on vindictive and selective prosecution. I've never seen one prevail. So, my dogs have been quite entertaining today. They do not have a case of the Mondays. They have a case of the, I don't know, the Saturday nights or Friday nights or something. I think it's the cold weather that just came in. All right, anyway, I've rambled on enough. Let's give this thing the attention it deserves. And what I'm going to do is, as we get to the point where we get to when the exhibits are introduced here, I'm going to jump over and open those exhibits up and we'll examine them. Some of them will deserve more examination than others. Others we're already familiar with, like Horowitz reports. But what I'm really looking for is how those exhibits are introduced here, because I have a feeling, I don't know this to be true. My sense, though, based on my experience with these things and just how media and influencers work, and my sense of how these filings work, is that the way those things were characterized in MAGA media and by MAGA influencers or so-called MAGA influencers is not necessarily the way they're presented in this filing. I also think that there's these may be lacking some context. As I've articulated in another video I recorded today, I don't know if it's going to be appearing in this episode, but I talked about how you always have to keep in mind that each side in one of these cases is arguing, and should be arguing, for who their client is or from their position. So the prosecution is always going to be characterizing whatever they write, whatever they file, whatever they say to media, whatever they put in these motions is always going to be couched, and it's always going to be articulated in a way that advances their position or their view in the case and moves towards where they're trying to get the case to go. And the same is true for the defense. The defense is always going to put things in the context of and characterize things in a way that is to their advantage. And that's what each side should do. That's literally their job. And there's no judgment against them for doing that, but it is something that you should always be aware of. Okay. United States response in opposition to defendant motion to dismiss indictment based on vindictive and selective prosecution. And I just thought, since this is signed United States, is that Henry Whitaker guy also, did he also sign this? No. So it's Lemons and Diaz. They're the United States attorneys out of North Carolina who are prosecuting this case. And then Lindsay Halligan has signed it here. Okay. Just wondering. All right, defendant's motion should be denied because this prosecution is neither vindictive or selective. Table of contents, blah, blah, blah. Okay, introduction. Defendant James B. Comey Jr.'s motion to dismiss the indictment based on allegedly vindictive and selective prosecution should be denied. Through a mix of news reports, social media posts, and speculation, the defendant weaves a tale of what he calls, quote, glaring constitutional violations that resulted in his indictment for making a false statement to Congress and obstructing a congressional investigation. The Supreme Court has imposed demanding standard on defendants, arguing a prosecutor brought an indictment for reasons forbidden by the Constitution. Such claims ask courts to exercise judicial power over a, quote, special province of the executive and risk unnecessarily impairing the performance of a core executive constitutional function. When the rigorous legal standard is applied to the facts here, it is clear that the defendant has failed to show the Constitution requires the court to take the extraordinary step of dismissing this case. The prosecution here is not vindictive. the defendant has not produced direct evidence of a vindictive motive, and he has not shown that the prosecutor pursued this case solely to punish him, James Comey, for exercising his First Amendment rights. So he has not carried his heavy burden of establishing vindictive prosecution. The prosecution is also not selective. The defendant has not identified similarly situated individuals who were not prosecuted, and he has not provided evidence that the decision to prosecute him was made because of his protected activities. He has not produced the, quote, clear evidence required for dismissing an indictment based on selective prosecution. A duly appointed and unbiased prosecutor presented the indictment, and a duly constituted grand jury found probable cause that he committed the indicted offenses. The motion to dismiss and request for discovery should be denied, and the case should proceed to trial. Background: the defendant served as FBI director and the mid-year examination, or his service as. The defendant served as director of Federal Bureau of Investigation from September 2013 until May 2017, when the president fired him. In July 2015, the FBI opened an investigation referred to as the mid-year exam. The mid-year exam investigation was focused on former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server to conduct official government business. The primary crime under investigation was mishandling of classified information and failure to report the mishandling of classified information. By the spring, that's exhibit number 1. So exhibit number 1 here is the report. Review of various actions by the FBI and DOJ in advance of the 2016 election. By the spring of 2016, the defendant, quote, and the mid-year team had determined that absent an unexpected development, evidence to support a criminal prosecution of Clinton was lacking. The OIG found that despite having conversations with the then Deputy Attorney General regarding the joint announcement of a decision to decline criminal prosecution, the defendant began considering the possibility of an FBI-only public statement in late April and early May 2016. The defendant stated that an FBI-only public statement was, quote, warranted by the 500-year flood in which the FBI found itself. Of note, the timing and presumption that Clinton would eventually be the Democratic Party nominee for president was part of the defendant's decision-making process. The defendant eventually made a conscious decision not to tell DOJ leadership about his plans to make a separate statement because he was concerned that they would instruct him not to do it. The defendant concealed his intentions from the DOJ regarding his decision to independently make a declination announcement. On July 5th, 2016, the defendant made a public statement in which he announced that the FBI had completed its mid-year investigation, criticized Clinton and her senior aides as extremely careless in their handling of classified information, stated that the FBI was recommending that the DOJ decline prosecution of Clinton, and asserted that no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute Clinton based on the facts developed by the FBI during its investigation. Footnote: the defendant contacted DOJ leadership about his plans to make a public statement, but he did so only after the FBI notified the press, so as to make it impracticable for the DOJ leadership to prevent him from delivering his statement. That behavior, the OIG determined, was extraordinary and insubordinate. The OIG determined that the defendant's decision to make this statement was the result of his belief that only he had the ability to credibly and authoritatively convey the rationale for the decision not to seek charges against Clinton, and that he needed to hold the press conference to protect the FBI and the DOJ from the extraordinary harm that he believed would have resulted had he failed to do so. But just 2 months later, in September of 2016, an unrelated investigation of the FBI's New York field office discovered potentially thousands of new emails relevant to mid-year exam. As a result, on October 28, 2016, the defendant sent a letter to the chairman of various congressional committees regarding the newly discovered information and the possible relevance to mid-year exam. That is exhibit number 2, which is here. This is the letter that Comey sent Judiciary Committee, right? well, sent to the chairman of various congressional committees regarding what had been discovered. Let's see what James Comey wrote. It's addressed to Nunes, Burr, Grassley, Shelby, Johnson, Chaffetz, who leaked it, Culverson, Goodlatte. In previous congressional testimony, dear Monsieur Chairman, in previous congressional testimony, I referred to the fact that the FBI had completed its investigation of former Secretary Clinton's personal email server. Due to recent developments, I am writing to supplement my previous testimony. In connection with an unrelated case, the FBI has learned of the existence of emails that appear to be pertinent to the investigation. I am writing to inform you that the investigative team briefed me on this yesterday, and I agreed that the FBI should take appropriate investigative steps designed to allow investigators to review these emails to determine whether they contain classified information, as well as to assess their importance to our investigation. Although the FBI cannot yet assess whether or not this material may be significant, and I cannot predict how long it will take us to complete this additional work, I believe it is important to update your committees about our efforts in light of my previous testimony. Sincerely yours, James B. Comey. Okay. He wrote that the FBI would take appropriate investigative steps. The defendant's correspondence with Daniel Richman and Richman's correspondence with the press regarding mid-year exam investigation. Paragraph B. I never really know how to introduce these, whether I just say B, this, or section B, or whatever. Bullet point B, I don't know. After the defendant sent the October 2016 letter, the defendant emailed extensively with Daniel Richman, a Columbia Law School professor who also served as an FBI special government employee since 2015. Footnote. In early 2015, while discussing potential opportunities at the FBI with FBI personnel, Mr. Richman represented that he, quote, regularly got contacted by journalists, particularly the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Financial Times, to explain things, and they often end up quoting me. Obviously, I would not plan to say anything on or off the record about matters I work on for the Bureau. See Exhibit 3, which is a January 2nd, 2015 email. Okay. January 2nd, 2015, 6:55 p.m. from Daniel Richman on behalf of Daniel Charles Richman, which is him. He's using his Columbia email address, and it's to Patrick N. Finlay, OGC, so Office of General Counsel of the FBI. He CCs James Baker. Subject line says reply, reply, reply. So we don't know what the original email was. We just have this one here. And it says, Happy New Year to you. On the particulars, a consultant appointment sounds just fine. I guess I have to give up my dream titles of super special assistant to the director or royal steward. So he's joking here. As I told Jim B, probably Jim Baker. Yeah, as I told Jim B, I bet that's James Baker or Jim Baker. I think we should keep remuneration to a minimum. In the fall, I will be on sabbatical, getting my full salary from Columbia. And while I hope to start being useful to the Bureau well before then, I'm perfectly ready for the work to be pro bono. So he's saying, look, you don't got to pay me a whole lot to do this thing. I'm on full salary at Columbia. And if need be, I'll work pro bono for the FBI. Where money may come in may be for the reimbursement of travel expenses if I end up going to DC a lot. He lives in New York. But perhaps that matter can wait. Some things to flag on the ethics side. One, I regularly get contacted by journalists, particularly the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Financial Times, to explain things, and they often end up quoting me. Obviously, I would not plan to say anything on or off the record about matters I work on for the FBI, for the Bureau. The only issue that I can think of is whether I can keep up my public profile as a Columbia academic. If possible, I'd like to continue doing this, as it's good for the school and, in my humble opinion, makes criminal justice coverage slightly more accurate than it would be otherwise. Okay, I get the point he's making. He doesn't want to be known as Daniel Richman, special government employee at the FBI. He wants to be Daniel Richman, Columbia law professor. From time to time, I have been paid to provide legal advice about federal criminal cases. I'm not involved in anything right now, except for a lawyer who emails inquiries every month or so that I spend about 15 minutes on. But we should clarify what, if anything, I can continue to do. On the clearance front, I suspect that I don't have any active clearances. I left the SDNY U.S. Attorney's Office in 1992. Are y'all ready for me to start talking about the band? I've made it 21 minutes. Are y'all ready for me to start telling you about how Daniel Richman is connected to the band in the SDNY in Manhattan and how he was prosecuting mobsters in the 80s alongside Comey, Ray, Terwilliger, and others? Giuliani. Does that change maybe your opinion of this whole thing? In the 1990s, I worked as a consultant for the Treasury Department. You can just put that, just put Daniel Richman's work history, just put a pin in that. We might end up going to that later. As part of the Waco Investigative Review, run out of the Undersecretary for Enforcement's office and for the DOJ Office of Inspector General. In connection with my DOJ OIG work, I received secret clearance for the report on the CIA crack cocaine or lack of connection. More recently, I consulted for the Interior Department's Deepwater Horizon inquiry, run out of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Regulation and Enforcement, but I don't imagine that involved a heavy-duty clearance. You guys will obviously be the best judges of what's needed, but my current dive into the going dark public literature has highlighted the level of secrecy that attends the government's side of the debate. So I suspect that the higher my clearance, the more use I can be. And that usefulness will hopefully transfer into other areas too. Look forward to talking. Signed, Dan Richman. You get a reply from Patrick Finlay of the OGC. It says, Happy New Year. I'll ask Jim's scheduler block out some time on Jim's calendar to discuss this further. So to discuss what clearances he may need and what he can and cannot be involved in if he's going to be a special government employee at the FBI. Which, by the way, I suspect some people that many of my audience are fans of have also been special government employees of the FBI or DOJ or something along those lines, in the neighborhood of something like that. And I would not assume anybody that's employed by the FBI in such a capacity that there's something automatically nefarious about that. Just saying. It could be. It could be that this is a super secret special way, super clever way to make him a cutout for James Comey arrange leaks to the media. But it also could be he's one of many who has served in this capacity, including people that we, to an extent, are fans of, let's say, and have benefited from their coverage and their knowledge of things at the FBI. All right. Much of the correspondence occurred via the defendant's use of a personal email account and Mr. Richman's use of an email account associated with Columbia University. For example, one day after the defendant sent the October 28th letter, Mr. Richman emailed the defendant regarding the letter. Mr. Richman wrote, quote, make sure you keep your eyes shut. The country can't seem to handle you finding stuff, or you're finding stuff. That's going to be exhibit number 4. We have a date on this. 10/29/16. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so this is right after Comey informs Congress of the Wiener laptop information and that he's reopened the Clinton email investigation. This is also the day before McCabe leaks to the Wall Street Journal through Lisa Page. It says big night, question mark, to JBC, so James B. Comey. 1, are going trick-or-treating, question mark. 2, if so, what are you going as, question mark. 3, make sure you keep your eyes shut. The country can't seem to handle your finding stuff. 4, there are more morons with access to ink than I ever dreamed. That is, I relate. I relate to that. Signed Daniel Richman, Paul J. Kellner, professor of law, Columbia Law School. And this is emailed to Reinhold Niebuhr 7@gmail.com, which is an alias that we now know that Comey used, an alias email he used to communicate with Richman. It says, to me. I wonder why it says to me. I wonder if it's just he emailed this to himself. He sent his reply to himself. I don't know. Thanks for the battling you have done against unreason. This is a strange time, but we press on. I kind of like this exchange. That's a fun exchange. Okay. The next day, so that'd be October 30th, which is the day that McCabe leaked to the Wall Street Journal about the email investigation and about the Clinton Foundation investigation, which was much more significant, I believe. The next day, Mr. Richman sent the defendant an email regarding an op-ed he had been asked to write for the New York Times about the defendant's letter, Government Exhibit 5. New York Times up here, dated 10/30/16, Daniel Charles Richman to James B. Comey, or JBC. The New York Times op-ed page asked me to write something on your letter. I'm not inclined to do so, but if you think it will help things to explain that you owed Congress absolute candor, and that your credibility with Congress will be particularly important in the coming years of threatened congressional investigations, I'll do it. And it says to me down here, no need at this point. It would be shouting into the wind. Someday they will figure it out. And as Jack and Ben point out, my decision will be one a President-elect Clinton will be very grateful for, although that wasn't why I did it. Aha. I've seen lots of people zero in on that right there. Okay, now I know why it says to me. It's because this is like a copy paste thing. Because when you're in your email, when you're looking at this one, you'll see where it says to me. So this is from Daniel Richman's iPhone or his iPad or iCloud account or something, and they're in it looking at it. And so here it's saying he has Reinhold Niebuhr in there as JBC, I would think. And then right here it says to me because it's to him, Daniel Richman. So you're in his account. I get it now. Okay. One, what James Comey did to inform Congress that he'd reopened the mid-year exam because of the Wiener laptop. Totally the right thing to do. Also, a very difficult thing to do, but not a difficult thing to do. Comey later talked about this. The same hearing where Grassley asked him the questions about anonymous sources, the same hearing that is quoted in this indictment by Ted Cruz, right? And Ted Cruz screws up his quotes of it. In that same exchange with Grassley, I'm pretty sure it's with Grassley, he's asked about this. It's very early on in that hearing. He's asked about his decision to reopen mid-year exam. And he talks about how it was a choice between a worst decision and a horrible decision and a worse decision. If he didn't do anything, it would be wrong, and he would be destroyed for it, and the FBI's credibility would be destroyed if he buried it. If this Wiener laptop stuff came to them, and the Wiener laptop had emails on it and information on it relevant to the mid-year exam, if he did nothing, right, then that would be a horrible decision, and he would deservedly be destroyed over it. It would be the wrong thing to do, right? At the same, even if he used the excuse, well, the election wasn't over yet, I was waiting until the election was over, that would also be bad. It would be bad narrative-wise, it'd be bad appearance-wise, it'd be bad credibility-wise. So if he did reopen it without informing Congress, as he had promised to do, he had already told Congress, if anything ever happens with this, I'm going to let you guys know. That would also be bad for all the same reasons, but at least it would be a little bit better because he actually took some action. If he took some action and also informed Congress, it would still be bad. He would still be ridiculed for it. It would still look bad. It would have an impact on the election, or could have, all of these things, but it was the least bad choice. Credibility-wise, it was the best choice credibility-wise. Candor-wise, transparency-wise, it was the best choice. But in every other respect, and investigatively, it was the best choice, right? But in every other respect, it was the worst choice. And he made it, and it was the right thing to do. It was one of the, like, seriously, it's, if you set aside your hatred for Comey, which you listening or watching this may or might not have, I'm not saying that every single person that does hates Comey, but I think a lot of my audience does, and that's, understandable. I get why you've been convinced of that position. I get it. I'm not convinced of it, but I get why you're convinced of it. At least at this point, I think you can appreciate, anybody can, the position he was in and why it was the right thing to do, and he did the right thing, and you can give him at least some credit for doing the right thing. Now, his reply here. He's telling Daniel Richman there's no need for you to write something about my letter to Congress reopening mid-year exam. At this point, it would be shouting into the wind. Ain't that the truth? Someday they'll figure it out. And as Jack and Ben point out, my decision will be one President-elect Clinton will be grateful for, although that wasn't why I did it. Now, who are Jack and Ben? And notice how him quoting them, what they said about this is being portrayed as him saying it. He's not saying, I did this, and President-elect Clinton's going to be really grateful for it. He's saying, and as Jack and Ben point out, my decision will be one a President-elect Clinton will be very grateful for, although that wasn't why I did it. Have you noticed how media reporting is only focusing on this right here? They're just literally pasting or writing out this one part. My decision will be one President-elect Clinton will be very grateful for. And they're leaving out that he's referring to what other people said. And as Jack and Ben point out, now why would President-elect Clinton be grateful for Comey doing that? Why would President-elect Clinton be very grateful for Comey informing Congress that he had reopened mid-year exam based on the Wiener laptop information? That I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Okay. Go back to the filing. Mr. Richman said that he was not inclined to write something, but that he would do it if the defendant thought it would help, thanks to explain that the defendant owed Congress absolute candor, and that the defendant's credibility with Congress would be particularly important in the coming years of threatened congressional investigations. The defendant responded, "No need. At this point, it would be shouting into the wind. Someday they will figure it out. And as individual one and individual two." Are we introducing new people in this indictment? Or is that... I didn't expect that. Are we... I'm not going to make too much of it right now. But that's curious to me. I don't know why they didn't just say who those people are. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they're not entirely sure who Ben and Jack are either. So they're just calling them individual one and individual two right now. Okay. Point out, my decision will be one a President-elect Clinton will be very grateful for, although that wasn't why I did it. The defendant appears to have reconsidered that view shortly thereafter. On November 1st, 2016, he emailed Richman stating, "When I read the Times coverage involving Reporter 1, is this an exhibit also?" Yes, Exhibit 6. I would like to see... let me go to... Here, let me see if it... I don't think I'll actually need to purchase it. No, I don't. It's just that for whatever reason, Exhibit 6 isn't available on Court Listener. Okay, now I got this right here. Exhibit 6. It's another email. No subject. Dated November 1st, 2016. From Comey under his alias, Reinhold Niebuhr. Which, by the way, Reinhold Niebuhr is a... like a preacher. I don't even remember how to spell it. Is it N-I-E-B? I think that's how you spell it. Yeah, was an American Reformed theologian, ethicist, and commentator on politics and public affairs, and professor at Union Theological Seminary for more than 30 years. He died in 1971. Niebuhr was one of America's leading public intellectuals for several decades of the 20th century and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964. His books include Moral Man and Immoral Society and The Nature and Destiny of Man. He also was an anti-communist. I feel like there was something else I know about him. There was something else. I don't remember exactly right now. Anyway, this is... I tend to think there's a reason why Comey would choose this name as his alias. Okay, when I read the Times coverage involving Mike S., I wonder if that's Mike Schmidt, I am left with the sense that they don't understand the significance of my having spoke about the case in July. It changes the entire analysis. Perhaps you can make him smarter. Yeah, it's going to be Mike Schmidt, because that's who Daniel Richman had a working relationship with at the Times. Let's imagine the Times had a policy against writing new articles close to elections, if the articles might influence the election. Consistent with that policy, they would avoid writing this week if sources told them that the FBI was looking at Huma Abedin's emails. Let's imagine that they wrote a very high-profile piece in July that sources led them to now conclude was materially inaccurate. Would they correct it or stay silent because they have a policy to avoid action near elections? I suspect they would quickly conclude that either course is an action. And the choices are either reporting or concealing. And there is no longer a neutral option because of the reporting in July. I also suspect they would resolve very quickly to choose the action of disclosing, because to remain silent is to actively mislead, which has a wide range of very bad consequences. Why is this so hard for them to grasp? All the stuff about how we were allegedly careful not to take actions on cases involving other allegations about which we have never spoken is irrelevant. I love our practice of being inactive near elections, but inactivity was not an option here. The choices were act to reveal or act to conceal. I don't think you can. I totally get that. Makes all the sense in the world. Reply from Daniel Richman. This is precisely the case I made to them and thought they understood. I was quite wrong. Indeed, I went further and said mindless allegiance to the policy and recognition that more evidence could come in would have counseled silence in July to let HRC twist in the wind. And then he replies again, just got the point home to Mike, probably was rougher than you would have been. So, and these two replies from Richman are from the next day. So apparently he had a discussion with Mike Schmidt and was quite forceful on this point. Makes all the sense in the world to me. Surely it does to you guys too. Okay, we can skip that because it's a quote of this. Mr. Richman responded the next day saying this is precisely the case he made to them. Mr. Richman emailed the defendant shortly thereafter. Writing that he got the point home. The defendant emailed Richman shortly thereafter, entitling the message "pretty good," and sending a link to a New York Times piece regarding the defendant's purported options in late October 2016 concerning the Clinton email investigation, the mid-year exam. See Government Exhibit 7. Got to point out, guys, so far we haven't come across anything that's like telling us that Daniel Richman was authorized to serve as an anonymous source, which is the allegation that Comey made the false statement about. The false statement isn't that he never authorized Daniel Richman to speak to media. The allegation is that he had authorized Daniel Richman to serve as an anonymous source in media reporting concerning Hillary Clinton. Not even Hillary Clinton investigation, Hillary Clinton, which wasn't the question that was asked. So this is the problem with this indictment. It doesn't accurately represent the questions that were asked. Reinhold Niebuhr. Someone showed some logic. I would paint the cons more darkly, but not bad. And it quotes this New York Times piece. James Comey options, classified information, Hillary Clinton elections. Daniel Richman says, see, I can teach, and I just did more teaching with Megan Fox and Anderson Cooper. I wore a jacket this time. Comey replies, well done, my friend, who knew this would be so fun. So, fun. It's not really all that fun, I don't think. I can't grab this hyperlink. Is the hyperlink included in the filing? Yes. Yay. Thank you for doing that. Lindsay Halligan, Diaz, and what's the other guy? Diaz and not Liam, Lime. What's his name? Nathan whatever. Of course, it's probably all being done by Jessica Carmichael. No, wait, she's with Comey, so it's not her. What's his name? I'm so sorry. Nathan or Nathaniel, whatever your name is. Lemons. Tyler Lemons. Nathan Tyler Lemons. There we go. Thank you for including the hyperlink. I appreciate it. Okay. This is the article. It says Matt Apuzzo and Sergio Picana are the authors. This is the follow-up right here. When federal officials concluded their investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private server, James Comey had a decision to make on how to announce that news. Comey's decisions right here. Okay. Is Richman quoted here? I don't see his name coming up. But I also didn't see anywhere in those email exchanges where Comey told Richman, go be an anonymous source for the FBI or for me in these articles. Okay. The defendant wrote, someone showed me logic. I would paint the cons more darkly, but not bad. Someone showed some logic. Mr. Richman replied, see, I can teach. The defendant replied, well done, my friend. Similarly, in April 2017, the defendant emailed Mr. Richman apparently regarding a lengthy article in the New York Times in which Mr. Richman was a named source. Yeah, this is going to be one of my favorite articles of all time. Regarding the Clinton email investigation. Again, he's a named source. Government Exhibit 8. I'm pretty sure I know exactly which article this is. We've talked about it on this show. I've read the whole thing to you guys. To Comey under his alias from Daniel Richman, April 23rd, 2017. You're ever so welcome. Or it says, I read the piece. Thanks so much for your words and tell Mike he did a good job. Would be different if I wrote it, but it is by and large fair. You're so welcome, and will do regarding Mike. Any badly or underdeveloped points for me to work on with the New Yorker, or just the usual? And that article, does it link it down here? It didn't. It's the Comey tried to not influence an election. Comey tried to shield the FBI. Then he ended up influencing an election or something like that. He shaped an election. That's the word, shaped. This article right here. It's very long. And Richman appears several times in it. And it's Matt Apuzzo, Michael Schmidt, Adam Goldman, and Eric Lichtblow. And I do like that article a lot. I can't help it. I like it a lot. It's got a ton of information in it, including about the Renteria memo. All right. Next one. Consistent with the above described correspondence, Richman corresponded extensively with members of the media regarding or on behalf of the defendant, okay, including in an anonymous capacity. For example, in February 2017, Richman emailed Individual 3, a then government official who had served a high-ranking positions at the FBI and DOJ. Mr. Richman wrote, hi, Individual 3, my pal at the New York Times, Reporter 1, is, along with Reporter 2, Reporter 3, and Gag Me, Reporter 4, is doing a huge piece on the HRC emails. He's had a ton of background conversations with players and non-players like me. Reporter 1 very much would like, and this is Exhibit 9, I want to see it. Who does he say gag over? I bet it's Lichtblow. Because I say gagged over Lichtblow. Okay, these emails are not in the order. I need to read from bottom to top, I think. 2/11/17. 4:39 p.m. Yeah, I think I need to read from the bottom up on these. Interesting days, huh? Hope to see you soon. February 11th at 4:37. Hi, Chuck. My pal at the New York Times, Mike Schmidt, is, along with Apuzzo, Goldman, and Gag Me, Lichtblow, called it, is doing a huge piece on the HRC emails. He's had a ton of background conversations with players and non-players like me. Mike very much would like to talk to you exclusively on background as he tries to understanding Jim's decision making to the extent possible. Mike asked me to reach out to you, hence this email. Would you be willing to chat with him? So who is it he's writing this to? Hi, Chuck. Who's Chuck? Who is Chuck? Richman emailed Individual 3, a then government official who had served in high-ranking positions at the FBI and DOJ. And he tells him, Michael Schmidt at the New York Times very much would like to talk to you exclusively on background as he tries to understand James' decision-making to the extent possible. He asked me, the reporter, asked me to reach out to you, hence this email. Would you be willing to chat with him? Individual 3, this then government official who had served in high-ranking positions at the FBI and DOJ, replied in the affirmative and stated that he would reach out to the reporter. Where's this footnote continuing from? It's saying that okay, this footnote is talking about this right here. This follow-up. It's not even an article. It's not an article. It's a flow chart, right? It's a flow chart the New York Times put out after the November 1st article on Comey informing Congress. And it's saying there that Richman does not appear to have named the article does not appear to have named Mr. Richman as a source, as we discovered as we looked at it. Okay. Who is this guy? Who's Chuck? Interesting days. I'll reach out to him. Thank you. Oh, for boring days, unless you just prefer that I give Mike your email. Here it is. And that's Chuck Rosenberg. Okay. I'll reach out to him. Thank you. So this is Chuck Rosenberg. What's this next one? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just a photocopy. Who is Chuck Rosenberg? He spells Berg with an E. Chuck Rosenberg. He was at DEA. I believe this is him. Chuck Rosenberg is an American attorney who served as the acting administrator of the DEA from 2015 to 2017. He formerly served as the U.S. Attorney for EDVA and for the Southern District of Texas. He was a senior FBI official on staff of 2 FBI directors and a counselor to the Attorney General and Chief of Staff to the Deputy Attorney General and Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia in Norfolk, as they say, in Alexandria. Let's see, came up in New York. He was counsel to Mueller, 2002 to 2003. Chief of Staff to Deputy Attorney General James Comey when Comey was Deputy Attorney General back in 2004 and 2005. Let's see, he was nominated by Bush to EDVA. He was appointed by Alberto Gonzalez. Ooh, he handled the dogfighting charges against Michael Vick. That piece of shit. Heavily involved in government's capital punishment case against Zacharias Moussaoui for September 11th. Okay. Resignation from DEA. In August 2017, Rosenberg, a holdover from the Obama administration, found himself at odds with the Trump admin over the president's remarks encouraging that the police be rough with suspects. His internal memo to the DEA workforce gained public attention for Rosenberg's repudiation of Trump's remarks. Okay. September 26, 2017, it was announced that Rosenberg, dismayed by the Trump admin, was stepping down. Resignation effective October 1st, 2017. Became an MSNBC contributor. Was on Maddow. And was a frequent guest on other shows. Okay. This guy. Okay, so one thought I had coming across that email was, is this the person, because it's February 2017, as I was thinking, was this the person that leaked some classified information to the Times? Because that's one of the questions in the media leak investigation, is that the Times had some classified information already when Strzok and Page went to meet with them on background for a different article. And that was one of the things that Durham and others were investigating in the media leak investigations, was how did the Times already have this classified information? And it had to do with the Renteria memo, Russian reports, those things. But I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't expect that the DEA administrator would have knowledge of those things. But here he is serving as background. All right, well, we figured out who he was. Individual 3 is Chuck Rosenberg, DEA administrator. And the reason he's being reached out to is because he was a prosecutor and also worked in the DOJ. So, okay. And he said that he would reach out to Schmidt. Okay. Mr. Richman also corresponded with reporter 1, Michael Schmidt, via text message shortly after the defendant's termination as FBI director. Over a period of days beginning on May 11th, 2017, the pair texted, and this is going to be exhibit what? 10. So I would like to look at this, the actual exhibit. Okay, I've seen these floating around. Michael Schmidt, I just tried you, hadn't heard your voice in a few hours. This is on May 11th, 2017. So this is right after Comey's been fired. Because Comey was fired on the 9th. Says, I'm about to get on a flight to Chicago for the day. Just wanted to check in and wanted to push JBC, James B. Comey. My sense from his text is that he wants this to spill. And then Michael Garcia, which I believe is an alias for Daniel Richman. Yes. Okay, this is Daniel Richman saying, okay, you text him and I will reach out too. Just ask for the prox and clearance for me to talk as a non-source. Finally, we have a reference to Daniel Richman being an anonymous source. What's the approx? Michael Schmidt replies. Approximate date. Okay. When you reach out to him, tell him that you just need for him to allow you to talk, period. Work your magic, says Michael Schmidt. Richman replies, which number do you use to text him? He puts the number there. Is that the best one? He asks. Richman says, believe so. All right. It's raining here. It's raining C, then here. So that means he can't garden and be on porch. And then he writes back, this is how many minutes later? 30 minutes later, he sends another text to Daniel Richman saying, this is the message I sent him. And by the way, the source info here is from Daniel Richman's iPhone. Right there, it gives all the info right there. All right, so this is what Michael Schmidt apparently sent James Comey. I don't want to bother you as I wait to hopefully learn more about this tease. I do think you deserve to be left to catch your breath, but we're at too important a time in the story in the country's history for me to leave you alone. I have to try and throw everything I can against the wall. Questions of your unwillingness to give the president your loyalty are already out there. You don't even need to talk to me. Just give Richman green light to tell me about dinner. That's all. Okay. Okay, then let's see. 15 minutes later, Michael Schmidt sends a message to Richman saying, okay, I'm on a flight. I'll be off in about 45 minutes. Richman replies, just got go ahead. See my email. And then let's see. Looking at the time. 2 hours later, 2 hours, 9 minutes later, Michael Schmidt sends a text message to Richman saying, give me a shout. We think they only had dinner once, right? Richman says, believe so. Thanks. And then there's some sort of image here that we can't see. I think it's probably a meme or something like that. And then Richman replies, a source close to Jim. By the way, that's the last message on 5/11. Then 2 days later, on 5/13/2017, Richman messages Michael Schmidt of New York Times and says, a source close to Jim is now telling you that Jim very much looks forward to giving public testimony before Congress versus the closed testimony sought next week. Michael Schmidt replies, give me a call. And then he says, turn off your phone. This is 6 minutes later. He says, turn off your phone. I'm going to put this in a story and then tweet it out, and people may start bothering you. Sleep well. Okay, but I'm just an unnamed associate, right? Night, night, says Richman. And he says, yes, yes. I'm not going to tweet it, and an editor at the time probably will, but people won't pick it up. Different if I tweet it. This won't be a big thing, just a line in a story. And Daniel Richman replies, all right, okay. And then 3 days later, Michael Schmidt messages Richman saying, call me. Says, will do shortly. Know why. This is on 5/16. I want to give you some questions. A few small things, but important. Richman says, all right, in 5 minutes. And he tells me he can call my desk number. And then a long text from Daniel Richman. He said, this is on 5/16/2017. Comey told close associates that he had a disturbing conversation with Trump in February 14. Following a terrorism threat briefing by leaders of the intel community, Trump excused all those present, including the VP and Sessions, asking only Comey to remain. When the two were alone in the Oval Office, facing each other across the Resolute desk, Trump said he wanted to talk about Mike Flynn. He began with a long condemnation of leaks, but then turned to Flynn, telling Comey, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Comey replied only by saying, I agree, he is a good guy. Comey immediately created a memorandum memorializing the conversation, as he did with all his conversations with Trump, and shared it with his senior staff. They discussed what to do about what could be an effort to obstruct the investigation, and decided that because the conversation was one-on-one, it could not be corroborated. They agreed the best course was to ensure that none of those working the case knew of it, so they could not be influenced by it. But in recent days, after Trump himself raised the prospect that he might have taped Comey, the possibility of corroborating the president's words about Flynn has changed. Okay, we've read that Comey memo before on the show. Michael Schmidt replies, this is 2 days later. Schmidt messages Daniel Richman, says, call me. And then the next message is from June 7th. And Richman is telling him, it's up. And then we have an email here, it looks like, but it doesn't give us much information. Okay. So that was the string of text messages. And hold up, this is 8 pages. I'm wondering if this, surely not. This is the quarantined, this is not the attorney-client privilege stuff. No, because it's communications between Daniel Richman and Michael Schmidt. Okay. Yeah, that's not the potentially attorney-client privilege material. It's not. All right, Mr. Richman responded over a period of days beginning of May 11th. We just read all of these texts. And of course, the one that really stands out here that it's like, oh, that is worrying. The section of it, or the portion of the text, I should say, that is, I mean, a lot of it's of interest, but the section that's like, ooh, this looks bad for Comey, is this section right here where he's talking about, I'm just an unnamed source, right? And this is after him saying, reach out to him, see if he'll give you the clearance for me to talk as an anonymous source. Right? And then he says he got the clearance, but we don't ever see a text from Comey saying, all right, you're clear to be an anonymous source. Right? We don't ever see that. We see Richman saying that he was cleared. Just give Richman the green light to tell me about dinner, that's all. And then Richman says, just got go ahead, see my email. And we're supposed to infer from that he's going to be anonymous. And then later he sends, a source close to Jim is now telling you that Jim very much looks forward to giving public testimony before Congress. The reporter said, I'm going to put this in a story and then tweet it out, and people may start bothering you, so you should turn off your phone. And Richman messages back and says, but I'm just an unnamed associate, right? And he says, yes, yes. One problem, though, Comey's not at the FBI and by this point, and Daniel Richman isn't either, I don't believe. Didn't Daniel Richman resign from the FBI when Comey did? No, it was earlier than, no, wait. Daniel Richman resigned his position as a special government employee February 7th, 2017. So it was before this he resigned. And what was Comey indicted for? He was indicted for authorizing someone else at the FBI to serve as an anonymous source in media reports. So this does not fulfill the claim in the of count 1. Now, this isn't saying that it does. That's not what the prosecution is putting in this filing, but I'm just, you should be aware of that. All right, defendant's disclosure of memoranda concerning meetings with the president and his pertinent Senate testimony, which the OIG has already looked at. On May 3rd, 2017, while still the FBI director, the defendant testified in an FBI oversight hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He engaged in the following colloquy with Senator Grassley. Senator Grassley, Director Comey, Grassley asked, have you ever been an anonymous source on news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation? which would be Crossfire Hurricane, this says, or the Clinton investigation? Comey says never. Question 2, on relatively related, have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? Comey said no. On May 9th, the defendant was fired. Days later, the defendant sent copies of 4 of 7 memoranda he had drafted between January and April 2017, purportedly summarizing one-on-one interactions that he had with President-elect and the president to one of his personal attorneys. He sent them to Patrick Fitzgerald, who is right now at this time Comey's lead defense counsel. And it says Exhibit 11, which we've gone over those memos on this show fairly recently. And then right here, it links Horowitz review of those, finding no wrongdoing, no criminality there with what Comey did with the memos. Let's see right here. Transfer of Grassley's questions, footnote 7. The defendant told the OIG that the day after his removal, or very shortly thereafter, he retained attorneys Patrick Fitzgerald, David Kelly, and Daniel Richman. I've kind of been wondering if David Kelly is going to play a part anywhere in this whole saga, this indictment, this case, to provide advice and counsel in connection with his termination as FBI director and any post-termination legal issues that might arise. The defendant also asked Mr. Richman to share the contents of one of those memoranda with a reporter at the New York Times. Mr. Richman did. The defendant later told the OIG that he, quote, didn't consider what he asked Richman to do privileged, and that he didn't intend to assert any kind of privilege about the direction to Richman. When asked whether he was acting as Comey's attorney or as Comey's friend by contacting the reporter, Mr. Richman told the OIG that it was both, and that while one could imagine situations where parsing out that sort was necessary, Richman never found those occasions arose. In January 2017, the defendant testified before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and answered a number of questions from senators concerning the creation, handling, and sharing of the memoranda. We have a footnote down here that's rather long. It says the defendant sent copies of 4 memoranda, the 2nd, 4th, and 6th, as well as the redacted copy of the 7th, to Mr. Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald subsequently forwarded them to Richman and Kelly, and the defendant also sent Mr. Richman a digital copy or digital photograph of the 4th memorandum. Mr. Fitzgerald also forwarded the defendant's email and the memoranda to another email account belonging to Mr. Fitzgerald and saved material sent by the defendant to his own computer. The FBI, which determined that the 2nd memorandum sent by the defendant contained classified information, subsequently had to remove or delete the memoranda from the computer systems of Mr. Fitzgerald, Kelly, and Richman. The defendant never informed the FBI that he had shared the memoranda with them. Instead, the FBI first learned of that information from Richman, scrambled to go get it because they had just up-classified them. We went over this in a recent episode. All right. In June 2017, the defendant testified before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and answered a number of questions from senators. He engaged in the following colloquy with Senator Collins. And finally, did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside the DOJ? Yes, said Comey. And to whom did you show copies? I asked, the president tweeted on Friday, May 12th, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night because it didn't dawn on me originally that there might be corroboration for our conversation, that there might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a friend of mine to do it. And who was that? Asked Collins. Comey replies, a good friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia Law School. Noting that the defendant referred to Richman as a friend rather than his attorney, which, I mean, he can be both, right? Footnote 8. The OIG provided its factual findings to the DOJ for a prosecutorial decision regarding Comey's conduct, and after reviewing the matter, the department declined prosecution. Okay. In September 2020, which by the way, a lot of people have problems with this, that Comey said he did this, he had that memo go out, and that he asked Richman to provide that to media because Comey thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. A lot of people read that really bad. I don't really, because I think a special counsel was needed anyway. So I don't think that hurts. But so many people think that Mueller was so bad, and I just don't. But it's a whole other thing to get into. All right. Money, but mine is the same today. Okay, yeah, this is the whole thing the indictment's based on, even though it's inaccurate in the indictment. During defendant's testimony in September 2020, he engaged in the following colloquy with Senator Cruz. Senator Cruz. All right, let's shift to another topic. On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? You responded under oath, never. He then asked you, have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? You responded again under oath, no. Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth? Comey replied, I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017. Cruz replies, so your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak, and if Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct? Comey says, again, I'm not going to characterize McCabe's testimony, but mine is the same today. The president's concern with defendant's official conduct. Shortly after the defendant was fired, the president began to publicly express his concern that the defendant had leaked or authorized the leak of investigative information and had given false or misleading testimony to cover it up. For example, on May 31st, 2017, he referenced the false or misleading testimony by James Comey. On June 9th, he posted, Comey is a leaker. 2 days later, he posted, I believe the James Comey leaks will be far more prevalent than anyone ever thought possible. Totally illegal, ? In July, he posted a news report stating, report accuses material James Comey leaked to a friend contained top secret information. In October 2017, he posted James Comey lied and leaked and totally protected Hillary Clinton. In March 2018, the president posted, wow, watch Comey lie under oath to Senator G. When asked, have you ever been an anonymous source or known someone else to be an anonymous source? He said strongly, never, no. He lied as shown clearly on Fox and Friends. Next questions, independent answers. Okay. The president continued to express this sentiment throughout his first term. For example, in September 2018, the president quoted a law professor who said, quote, you know who's at fault for this more than anyone else? Comey, because he leaked information and laundered it through a professor at Columbia Law School. Shame on that professor and shame on Comey. Is that Turley or Dershowitz? I mean, that Dershowitz, such a great source. The defendant has cited no comments about him from President Trump between December 2020 and August 2022. Over the course of his 2024 campaign, President Trump continued to post references to the defendant's conduct as FBI director, including his handling of the mid-year exam investigation and his resulting OIG investigation. Point E, the defendant's public post about President Trump. On the defendant's part, his motion shows his first social media post speaking about the Trump administration, not the president directly, came in June 2017, over a month after he was fired, and after the president had publicly posted about his false or misleading testimony. There is no evidence of the defendant criticizing the president himself until April 16th, 2018, when he called the president morally unfit to be president. At that point, the president had clearly and repeatedly maintained that the defendant had authorized the leak of investigative information and lied to cover it up. The defendant opined that the president should not be reelected sporadically in 2018. He did so more often in the lead up to the 2020 election. In 2021, the defendant called President Trump a menace and a very bad person in a flurry of posts. He then advocated against reelecting President Trump fewer than 10 times between May 2023 and November 2024. Footnote: the government recognized that the defendant and president likely made public statements apart from their social media posts, but the defendant bears the burden of proof on his vindictive and selective prosecution claims. So this response addresses only the evidence he has produced. All right. Point F, law enforcement's investigations into unauthorized public disclosures. In the spring of 2025, a team of FBI investigators was assembled to examine possible reform of policies, procedures, compliance, and culture at the FBI. See Government Exhibit 12. So that is this. Opening electronic communication, criminal investigative, Miles Lee Starr. So this is the FBI agent who got pulled from the case. Case ID. This is also John Eckenrode is also there. Unknown subjects, alleged concealment, removal, or mutilation of capstone and official records, sensitive investigative matter. Synopsis: request to open and assign a preliminary investigation to investigate the activities or involvement of current and or former FBI employees for potential violations of Title 18 U.S.C. 2071, concealment, removal, or mutilation generally, and or other related offenses between July 1st, 2016 and the present day. Well, that's not what Comey's indicted for, is it? Oh, this is about the burn bags in the super secret skiff room. Oh, this is fun. Oh, this is a fun one. I already read this whenever the day that this thing was filed. This is the exhibit that really caught my attention. And I think it's very, very fun. Okay. We're going to detour and read this. Okay. For official use only. On or about April 15th, 2015, and this is from July 21st, 2025. On or about April 15, 2025, the Director's Advisory Team was informed of the unusual discovery of highly classified and sensitive documents found inside 5 burn bags located in room 9582, a certified SCIF at the FBI headquarters building in Washington, D.C. A cursory inventory of the 9582 SCIF revealed the existence of classified documents, including documents believed to be official records inside burn bags, which appeared to have been placed in the SCIF around the time frame of the 2025 presidential inauguration, which is Friday, January 2017, 2025 through Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. A brief review of the contents of the burn bags revealed that some of the documents left behind may have come from a collection of records held by certain unidentified senior government officials at FBI headquarters. The discovery of these burn bags contained highly sensitive records, presumably intended for destruction, precipitated an internal management review to determine whether there was a legitimate purpose and underlying motivation for storing such records in this manner inside 9582. This limited review was undertaken by the Director's Advisory Team for approximately 60 days to examine badge access entry logs and to confer the FBI's Information Management Division and the Security Division to establish a chronology of events involving the activities inside 9582. The preliminary steps also included a limited number of FBI employees or employee interviews, and an assessment of the nature of the documents found inside the burn bags, which revealed a variety of classified and unclassified records. Among the records found were many related to the FBI's Mar-a-Lago search, the January 6th Capitol breach, the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, as well as a copy of the classified appendix to the John Durham Special Counsel investigation. Moreover, an additional record discovered as part of this management review process was an original referral by the Central Intelligence Agency to former FBI Director James Comey, known as a Counterintelligence Operational Lead, CIOL. This CIOL, believed to have been missing for several years, was dated September 7th, 2016, and contained certain intelligence related to the 2016 U.S. presidential election campaign. The CIOL was found in a storage closet adjacent to the director's office and was subsequently transported to the 9582 SCIF. Former Director Comey previously testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee that he was unfamiliar with this CIOL, as well as its related intelligence. There are conflicting accounts arising from 3 employee interviews conducted to establish a chronology and a reliable summary of the activities involving the 9582 SCIF. The FBI's IMD division is charged with the responsibility for securing, cataloging, and preserving senior official records, also referred to as capstone records, under the rules set forth in the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA. IMD officials maintained that they were not made aware of the existence of the burn bags found inside 9582, nor were they consulted to examine the contents for their relevance to the capstone provisions of the NARA policies. The overarching context for the irregularities involving 9582 appears to be a hasty and chaotic effort by certain employees to collect senior management officials' records in advance of the anticipated transition of a new team of FBI executives taking control after the presidential inauguration. It is unclear, without further investigation, what the motivations and intent were for placing these records in burn bags inside 9582 SCIF. The Director's Advisory Team recommends a preliminary investigation be opened to expand on the initial internal management review to determine whether criminal activity exists and the fact pattern developed to date. Pursuant to DIOJ Section 6, the internal directed review has established adequate predication exists for a preliminary investigation to determine whether deliberate attempts were being made to conceal or destroy official records, contrary to the FBI's responsibility to preserve these records, in advance of the new administration and the transition to a new leadership team. As required in DIOJ Section 6.8, standards for opening or approving the use of an authorized investigative method in preliminary investigations, case agents foresee utilizing the following authorized investigative methods in this investigation: public information, records or information, blah, 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 grand jury subpoenas, polygraph, interview request, online services. Okay. Washington field office will assist. Sensitive investigative matter. This investigation involves former domestic public officials who held executive level positions within the FBI and include allegations of obstruction and or corruption, and therefore is considered special investigative matter. FBI's general counsel has reviewed the matter and concurs with the opening of the PI, the preliminary investigation, as an SIM. Case participants are Special Agent Miles Starr and Senior Advisor Jack Eckenrode. Supervisory management chain for this investigation includes redacted. That whole section's redacted. Pursuant to the FBI's Public Corruption Policy Guide, blah, 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 just prior in charge of FBI's Washington field office. Okay. I was wondering if we might see it involve Southern Florida. Okay. Fascinating. I gotta say, I kind of called BS on Kash Patel when he told that story on Rogan about us. I mean, I do still kind of call Kash embellished it. He embellished it as this super secret room. We called it as a SCIF. Several of us were like, Kash is talking about a SCIF. I know I said that, and he was. So we were right. The whole burn bag thing. I'm going to sit. I have a comment I'm going to sit on for a while. I'll bring it up when the time's right. All right. Law enforcement's investigation into unauthorized public disclosures. Spring and blah, blah. During their work, FBI investigators were alerted to a seemingly unused skiff in FBI headquarters containing a random collection of classified documents. I'm sure it's random. A large majority of the documents were on the floor in 5 burn bags. Room 9582 was then subject to an inventory for the documents that were located inside. Investigators located hundreds of pages relating to Crossfire Hurricane and then the then classified appendix to the Durham Special Counsel report, which is now partially declassified. Additionally, inside a locked safe within room 9582, investigators located copies of handwritten notes of the defendant when he was director of the FBI. See Government Exhibit 13. Now, much has been made of these, or this. There's only, it says notes, plural. Investigators located copies, plural, of handwritten notes, plural, of the defendant when he was the director of the FBI. Defendant's handwritten notes were not known to any prior investigative teams. I would love to know if they're calling this Comey's notes, but I would love to know if these really are Comey's notes. It says 9/26/16. James B. We have actually, I'm going to grab, instead of doing this and struggling to read this text right here. Actually, they may break it down in the filing what they say it says. Now, I want to grab one of the examples that people have done, because people have deciphered what it says. And there's a couple examples that I really like that I looked at earlier when this first came out. Yeah, this is not that one. Hope you guys don't mind me taking my time with this filing. I think it's totally worth it. I want us to look at some of Comey's notes, some other examples of his notes, because it says it's Comey's notes, but it's not like it's signed James Comey. It doesn't have James Comey's signature on it. It is the director's stationery, but there were times when Comey wasn't in a meeting, and instead McCabe was. And I would not put it past McCabe to be McCabe's handwriting. Don't know that it is. Just saying. Okay. Where is it? Patience. Where? There's one example I saw where someone did a really nice job with them. And I really want to grab that. I should have saved it. Should have bookmarked it. That's not the one I want. Okay. Let me hold up. I'm going to find it, and it's going to be so worth the wait, right? So going to be worth the wait. Yeah. Not that. Not that. Here we go. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. This is what I want to aid us in our look at this. So this is trust is earned, who's a good account to follow. He says, all right, hey, dumb theory here. Could be debunked by Morting. Mitch not being Stephen Halper. The Wiener laptop being seized earlier that day, which is a fact. This is 9/26/16. The Wiener laptop came into FBI possession earlier that same day. Seventh floor being tipped off, HRC emails were found on the laptop, and panic meeting being called to discuss the implications. That might be what these notes are from, is what he's saying. According to the OIG report, Wiener's laptop was seized on September 26th, and Hillary's emails were found that day. Supposedly, that didn't bubble up to leadership until the 28th. Ultimately, the laptop was set on until late October when a leaker shamed the FBI into looking at it. Let's say a tip to headquarters spurs a meeting. I divide the notes into 3 parts: what was found and what might be found, as in emails concerning HRC's Russia hoax or the truth about her health, what the Trump smear would look like, what the Russians are supposedly up to. So this is his theory, okay? And I just think it's worth considering because, and maybe I should have tried to decipher these. So it says right here, we have C/P, or maybe that's CID. Maybe that's criminal division. Maybe that's counterintelligence division. JB dash, we have. What do you make of that? These do really take some deciphering because look right here. It says Mitch. And then it's like crossed out. JB, is that John Brennan? Or is that James Baker? It says we have, it looks like CID, but it could be C/D or C/P dash. Undermine HRC. Something in the system. HRC plan to, a lot of people are seeing this as tie Trump, right? But look at the way that line is. See the line? If this is in the system and this is undermine and this is conclude or contrive or something, look right here on this. It says Trump finance. There's a dot for the I here. And on journalist, there's a dot slash. Looks like this person, when they dot their I's, they sometimes make it a slash, but not all the time. They don't do it on every occasion. But when they cross their T's, right there, right there, right there, right there. Look, HRC, like their pen is dragging. They're writing fast as they write this stuff down. So I don't think you can really 100% say this is tie Trump, but it probably is, okay? HRC plan to tie Trump, HRC health, carry Trump finance debts to Moscow, and then JB, so I'm guessing this is James Baker or John Brennan, probably John Brennan, journalist saying water on Trump, water and Trump, waiting Trump. I mentioned New York Times plus Russia. And then I think this is David. Do you see a pattern to our intrusions, Russia intrusions, use of state voter databases? And it does seem like this is possible. We have CP. Think about it. The Wiener laptop seized that day. This could be a meeting about what's on the laptop. We have CP. Undermine HRC. Confidence in system. HRC plan to hit Trump. HRC health. Trump finance debts to Moscow. Journalists saying something in Trump. I mentioned New York Times plus Russia. Do you see a pattern to the intrusions of state voter databases? I I think this is worth putting a pin in. That this right here might be a good deciphering of these notes. All right, now let's compare this handwriting. By the way, I'm not making the case this isn't James Comey's handwriting. I'm just saying it's worth. I'm saying it's worth that examining that possibility and comparing it with other examples of James Comey's handwriting that we have. So I have this one here. Catherine Herridge posted 2 examples before we got these notes. And I just found these pretty quickly. This is from September. This is September 4th, 2025. And this says exclusive Comey handwritten notes 2016 election update. So I'm going to open that up. And how many examples of his handwritten notes are in this thing? Oh, this document was removed. Damn it. All right, well, we have this one. Election updates. What is the goal? Informing U.S. people, disrupting Russians. And then I also have these right here. Okay. I'm going to queue this up. Actually, I don't know if it would. Here, I'm going to show you my whole screen. And I'm going to keep on this side. I'm going to check this other link and see if this link provides me any more examples, because the Scribd link was dead. This is... No, it doesn't. Okay, that's something else. All right, so on the right side... Actually, let me show you my whole screen. Thought I already had that in here. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. And then I want to see. Nope, that's not going to work. Display capture. There we go. Yep, that's what I'm going to want. Okay. That doesn't help you guys. Damn it, it doesn't work as well as I thought it would. Can I get it to fit to... That's not near as good as I thought it would be. All right, let me turn my video off. And then let me stretch this. Will it let me stretch it? What's going on is that my monitor is wider than my this display. All right, let me get this right here. We're gonna make this work, guys. We're gonna do it. We're gonna get it. Promise. We'll figure it out. We're going super pro. All right, let's examine 16 up here. Pretty similar. Also, his slash marks on the date look really similar. Election. Is there a TION down here? I mentioned. Similar enough, right? Similar enough. He doesn't cross the T right there in that note. What is the goal? Let's look at that word, the. Aha. Look, in the system, the goal, very, very similar. How he scribbles the word the. Very similar. Russians. How does he make the S's? Very similar. The R is not as similar as I'd like it to be. The U is similar, though. Okay, doesn't dot the I here. Doesn't dot it there. Is there a question mark here anywhere? No. That would be another one I'd like to look at. Shorthand W, W slash. Loss with not much gain is written right here. CH, lowercase ch. It's not as good as I'd like it to be. Definitely similar. And that really makes me feel pretty strongly this is Comey's handwriting that's in this note from the exhibit. Okay. Serious options really off the table because let's see. I want to look at that T there. Similar shape. There's kind of a forward slash to it. We have any H's right here to look at? I don't see any H's. We have election there. Wasn't election mentioned somewhere? I don't see election. No. Capital I. Similar. Is there a capital T? I see a capital T. I'm not seeing the thing with the letter lowercase I being dotted and the dot being a slash mark like it is here on this one. I'm not seeing that in these. But I do see here on election, the I is actually over the letter O instead of being over the I. You see that? So when I go here, that's the same thing right here on the word intrusion. In fact, that's a really strong match. When you look at this word election here, and then you look at the word intrusion. Oh, that's so strong. I mean, the T right here, assuming this really is the word intrusion, which is what it looks like. But when you go the IONS, is so close to the ION right here. So close. Okay. I'm feeling very confident that these notes that say is that they're an exhibit are Comey's notes, that they really are Comey's notes. Okay. Figured that was worth considering. And now we can be more confident that these are Comey's notes. Okay, so one of the scandals here that people are picking out is that there's a potential Comey deception here because he said he had not been briefed on an HRC plan to tie Trump to Russia as a means of distracting from her email server. And the hearing in which he said that, was it Lindsey Graham who was questioning him, was baffled by it. And Comey said that he had read Ratcliffe's letter, and he really didn't think it made a lot of sense and that it didn't ring a bell. The referral from the CIA, which is the referral they were talking about being found in the burn bags. And I got to float to you guys. What if that's true? What if that referral was never conveyed to Comey? What if it was kept from him? I don't know. Or what if he's lying about it? Because he also said in that hearing, under questioning about that subject, I can't answer. Oh, no. All right. Defendant's hammer zone is not known to prior investigative team. The investigating team reviewed access logs to room 9582. Thanks for indulging me and sticking with me while I looked at all that. And thank you for sticking with me while I'm going through this document. It's taking a lot more time than I thought it would. But I hope you guys find it as worthwhile as I am, because I think it's really... It's not so much that I think this motion is important because it rebuts Comey's motion for the motion to dismiss for selective and vindictive prosecution. I never thought that motion really had a strong chance at all of getting granted and the case being dismissed on that motion. But there's important information in this filing, and I want to do my due diligence with it, and I want to appreciate it to the best of my ability. And so thank you to all of you who are joining me in doing that. If you want to encourage me to do this more and keep me caffeinated and support the show in any way, or make sure you're following me and watching me and listening to me in all the places that I'm at. My link tree is in the description of the show. It's also in my profile, wherever you're listening or watching this or reading my content. It's all there. I've recently added my threads link right here. If you just want to look at my threads, especially if you're not someone who's allowed on X or you don't like X for whatever reason, I'm doing lots of threads over there, and you can access them right here. If you want to support the show, I have links to my affiliates right here, Benson Honey Farms, Bootleg Products, and Manly Cans. If you make a purchase over there, which Christmas is coming up, Thanksgiving before that, if you're looking to get some fresh honey or some salsa, sauces, chilies, it's chili season now. It's getting cold. It's getting into the 20s here today or tonight. These places have great products, and if you make a purchase, they're using my affiliate links. They'll kick a few dollars my way. Also, Ko-Fi.com, if you just want to buy me a cup of coffee, I very much appreciate it. And if you want to really support me, justhuman.substack.com, a paid subscription here, just $7 a month, or you can choose a monthly or yearly option. Keeps me caffeinated and keeps me funded for my purchases on Pacer, and keeps me right here doing what I'm doing tonight. We're not done. I just thought I'd plug my stuff since I've been doing this for 2 hours. Oh gosh, it's going so much slower than I thought it would, but it's way more interesting than I expected. Okay. We're almost through every exhibit. All right, back to room 9582. And we did look at Exhibit 12, right? Yes. Okay. The access logs showed an extended period of dormancy, where room 9582 is rarely, if ever, accessed. Then, in late December of 2024, access to room 9582 began to pick up with a spike of activity occurring over the inauguration weekend, January 19th to the 22nd of 2025. The discovery of handwritten notes is relevant considering the defendant's prior testimony on September 30th, 2020, Of note, during that hearing, the defendant was questioned by Senator Graham of South Carolina and Senator Hawley of Missouri. See Exhibit 14. So that's going to be what I was just talking about, where Comey said it didn't ring a bell. Yes, that's it right there. The questions focused on whether the defendant remembered being taught of U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections, I should say, as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private email server. The defendant responded by saying that it doesn't ring any bells with me, and I don't know what that refers to, and I don't remember receiving anything that is described in that letter, meaning Ratcliffe's letter. Despite this testimony, the defendant's handwritten notes, dated September 26, 2016, read, HRC plan to tie Trump, end quote. Now I'm just going to float it. I mean, guys, what if he didn't get that referral, like he said? So that's option one here as an explanation. Option two, what if the way it came to him and was communicated and the way they dealt with it was described or couched in the context of something completely different? It wasn't exactly that, right? Or three, what if he couldn't talk about it, which is what he said? First, he said it doesn't ring any bells with me, but that's the way Graham was describing it. And then Graham went on to describe it more, and he says, sorry, is there a question? And you're rambling. Yeah, you don't recall the inquiry I just read about in September 2016? Comey says, no, as I said, it doesn't again. Do you remember being told? It doesn't sound familiar. Do you remember being told by the intelligence community? Remember the episode with Trump in the hotel? With the hookers in the dossier? Well, yeah, I remember a portion of that. Okay, that was pretty hard to ignore. Do you remember in December, the intelligence community basically said a U.S. intelligence community report, blah, blah, blah. Do you have and then he keeps on asking me, I don't know what you mean, because Graham kind of rambled there. But then right here, well, you say you had a duty to look at allegations about the Trump campaign being involved with the Russians. You've got a letter now from Ratcliffe saying that that they intercepted information about an effort in July where Hillary Clinton approved an effort to link Trump to Russia, the mob. Do you have an investigation to look and see if whether that was true? Comey says, I can't answer that. I've read Ratcliffe's letter, which frankly I have trouble understanding. And then the other option is that Comey's just being deceptive here in this hearing on this subject, which maybe he was. Okay. Appointment of U.S. Attorney Halligan. This we're very familiar with. But Comey talks about him sharing that, and then Trump's statement on truth, which was a message to Pam Bondi. We're very familiar with all this. Okay, argument. We've gone through all of that, and just now we're at the argument. The president has, this is on page 22. We arrive at the argument section of this filing. The president has a responsibility to take care of the laws be faithfully executed. U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 3, and the U.S. Paragraph 3. And the U.S. attorneys help him discharge this responsibility by prosecuting offenses against the United States, 28 U.S.C. 547. To that end, a U.S. attorney is tasked with deciding what offenses to prosecute in her district. That decision is the special province of the executive branch. So she enjoys broad discretion in making it. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think anybody watching the show disagrees with any of this. The executive branch's discretion in this area is deeply rooted in the Constitution's separation of powers. The executive branch prosecutes offenses. The judicial branch adjudicates them. If instead the judicial branch could decide which offenses to prosecute, that would seriously risk individual liberty. And if the judicial branch could decide which offenses not to prosecute, that would improperly divest the president of the executive authority that the Constitution grants him. This separation of powers plays on the distinct talents of the different branches. The decision to prosecute is particularly ill-suited to judicial review, Wayne v. United States. Meanwhile, the executive branch is equipped to assess an offense and determine the extent of the societal interest in prosecution. The societal interest in this prosecution are readily apparent and overwhelming. The defendant is a former FBI director who lied to Congress about his conduct while at the helm of the nation's primary federal law enforcement agency. His prosecution implicates societal interest of the highest order. Nonetheless, he asked the court to take the extraordinary step of dismissing his indictment because, he says, he is being vindictively and selectively prosecuted. Given the deep-seated separation of powers principles at stake, his request can be granted only if the Constitution requires it. It doesn't. Therefore, judicial intervention should not deny the community the benefit of a prosecution. The government is not vindictively prosecuting the defendant. To establish a vindictive prosecution defense, a defendant must carry a heavy burden. He must show that his prosecution could not be justified as a proper exercise of prosecutorial discretion. To do that, a defendant must prove two elements through objective evidence. First, that the prosecutor acted with genuine animus towards him. Here, that requires direct evidence of a vindictive motive. Second, that the prosecutor pursued the prosecution solely to punish him for exercising a protected right. Because there are great costs to requiring the government to produce discovery related to a vindictive prosecution defense, a defendant seeking such discovery must first overcome a significant barrier by advancing objective evidence tending to show the existence of the defense. It should be rigorous for a defendant to overcome this significant barrier. The defendant argues that the evidence already on the record alone carries his heavy burden. Not so. His evidence, which is a mix of news reports, social media posts, and speculation, is hardly evidence at all. It certainly isn't direct evidence of a vindictive motive. And it fails to show that the prosecution was brought solely to punish him for exercising a protected right. The defendant has not carried a heavy burden required for dismissal or overcome the significant barrier to discovery. The court should deny his motion to dismiss for vindictive prosecution and his request for discovery, meaning discovery to this end, right? The defendant has not produced direct evidence of a vindictive motive. The defendant must first produce direct evidence of a prosecutor's vindictive motive. That requires him to produce evidence that will rarely exist, like a statement by the prosecutor evidencing a vindictive motive. He has produced no such statement. The defendant has not even attempted to show direct evidence that the prosecuting U.S. attorney had an improper vindictive motive. To start, the relevant analysis is whether the prosecutor charging the offense harbored vindictive animus. Here, that prosecutor is the U.S. attorney, yet the defendant doesn't present any evidence that she harbors evidence or animus against him. Instead, he says that he doesn't need any such evidence because his claim turns on the animus harbored by the official who prompted the prosecution. And according to him, that is President Trump. As discussed below, the president does not harbor vindictive animus against the defendant in the relevant sense. Before reaching that issue, however, the court should determine whether the defendant has offered sufficient evidence to find that the president displaced the U.S. attorney as the ultimate decision maker in bringing this prosecution. The only direct evidence on the issue says otherwise. The defendant's arguments rely on the imputed animus theory. The Fourth Circuit has never adopted that theory. In fact, when the defendant asked the Fourth Circuit to impute animus from investigating law enforcement agents, the Fourth Circuit categorically rejected the theory. That is consistent with other circuits' application of the theory in that context. When courts have entertained the imputed animus theory in other contexts, they have required a significant evidentiary showing. There must be evidence that the federal prosecutor did not make the ultimate decision to bring the indictment. The government is not aware of any case where that showing was met and a different party's animus was imputed to the prosecutor. Even in the defendant's primary case to support his argument, the Sixth Circuit did not impute animus to the prosecutor. It remanded, that was United States v. Adams, 1989. It remanded for factual determination as to whether there was evidence that the animus could be imputed. And on demand, the district court held there had not been a showing of realistic likelihood of vindictiveness. If you consider Wilson, a different case, even where an explicit request for prosecution from the allegedly vindictive actor did not allow animus to be imputed, there the defendant had absconded from law enforcement while serving a sentence in a felon in possession conviction from the District of South Carolina. Law enforcement and prosecutors from the District of South Carolina reviewed whether he could be prosecuted for escape. While that review was ongoing, the Fourth Circuit vacated the defendant's felon in possession conviction. Then, days later, the U.S. Attorney for the District of South Carolina sent an email message to the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of North Carolina, the proper venue for an escape prosecution, and requested that the defendant be prosecuted for escape. I don't even know if we need to read this example, because none of us disagree with this. And I think there's just no chance that Comey succeeds on this. Let me skip down. Defendant has not shown direct evidence that the president had an improper vindictive motive. Should the court decide that it needs to consider the president's alleged animus, the defendant has not carried his burden to present direct evidence that the president harbors animus in the relevant sense. The defendant primarily cites the defendant's social media posts. These posts reflect the president's view that the defendant has committed crimes that should be met with prosecution. They may even suggest that the president disfavors the defendant, but they are not direct evidence of a vindictive motive. In the context of a vindictive prosecution defense, vindictiveness has a specific meaning. It refers to a prosecutorial action, quote, whose objective is to penalize a person's reliance on his legal rights. None of the president's social media posts express a desire for the defendant to be penalized for exercising his First Amendment rights. Far from it. The president's social media posts are clear on why he thinks the defendant should be prosecuted. He thinks the defendant is, quote, guilty as hell. And probably so does most of my audience. Oh, that's funny. That is not an expression of vindictiveness. If you start with the meaning of prosecutorial vindictiveness, it is a term of art with a precise and limited meaning. United States v. Meyer, 1987. It doesn't refer to a prosecutor's personal spite or ill will toward an otherwise validly chargeable defendant. Indeed, vindictiveness could hardly be defined so broadly in a legal system that recognizes the legitimacy of retribution as a justification for punishment. Instead, vindictiveness refers to something narrower, prosecutorial action whose objective is to penalize a person's reliance on his legal rights. A vindictive prosecution defense typically is not exclusively, if not exclusively, applies in an even narrower context. It does not typically involve retaliation for the exercise of just any legal right. Instead, it involves retaliation for asserting a right during the criminal proceeding itself or a subsequent criminal proceeding. Some courts' description of the defense explicitly keeps this narrowed scope. Under this narrowed scope, for example, a defendant could show vindictiveness where a prosecutor brings more serious charges against a defendant solely because the defendant successfully exercised his right to appeal. Yet, a vindictive prosecution defense grounded in the defendant's exercising a right unconnected to the criminal proceeding, like exercising his First Amendment free speech rights before any prosecution begins, is dubious at best. In fact, as far as the government is aware, the Fourth Circuit has never held that a prosecution was vindictive based on a claim that the prosecutor retaliated against the defendant's exercise of a right unconnected to the criminal proceeding or the subsequent criminal proceeding. That said, the court need not decide whether the vindictive prosecution defense is strictly confined to its ordinary application, given the defendant's exercise of a protected right is attenuated from this criminal proceeding. The court should fully hold him to his heavy burden. by carefully considering whether he has produced direct evidence that the prosecution was brought for the purpose of punishing him for exercising a protected right. Even if the defense could apply, the defendant has not carried that burden. He has not produced direct evidence that he is being prosecuted in retaliation for his exercising of his First Amendment rights. Again, he primarily cites the president's social media post. And again, no post asks for the defendant to face retaliation for exercising a right. To the contrary, the president's post create a years-long record of legitimate prosecutorial motive. In his post, the president repeats his views that the defendant committed crimes, that he leaked information and laundered it through a professor at Columbia Law School, that he lied under oath to Senator G, that he is guilty as hell. None of the posts say that a prosecution should be brought as punishment for the defendant's exercise of First Amendment rights. And it would take a contrived reading of the post to infer such an improper vindictive motive. Even then, however, an inference is not direct evidence. In sum, the defendant doesn't allege that the U.S. attorney personally harbored genuine animus, and he has failed to establish that the president displaced the U.S. attorney as the ultimate decision maker, or that the president, in any relevant sense, harbors genuine animus that could be imputed to the U.S. attorney. His motion to dismiss and request for discovery should be denied. This is well argued. It's put my dogs to sleep, but it's well argued nonetheless. All right. Defendant has not shown the prosecution was brought solely to punish him. I feel like we've got that. Like we've totally got this. Let me see if there's anything else in here that is worth really going through, because now I'm starting to feel like we're just retreading. There is one of the real benefits of this exercise of selective and vindictive prosecution, going through and hashing it out to get the denial of the motion, is that it'll serve us well, meaning it'll serve Trump, it'll serve this current FBI and DOJ. It'll serve the pursuit of justice well when others that Trump has badmouthed on social media are indicted, like John Brennan or whoever else, right? So it's just helping to set the template, even if it's narratively and it's in this district case. It's useful to go ahead and have this exercise over something like a 1001 charge, because it'll inform the battles ahead with the grand conspiracy case and others that we hope are ahead of us in the near future, right? Okay. I'm scanning it to see if there's. I'm kind of done with this filing because I was like, we've got the point, and some of this we've already hashed out in the unlawful. This is now dealing with the appointment of Halligan and the removal of Siebert, and we've already hashed that out in the arguments over her appointment. So this is retreading that material, which we've already gone over. Yeah, defendant fails both prongs of the selective prosecution test. And he has not identified similarly situated individuals who were not prosecuted or provided evidence that the decision to prosecute him was made because of his protected activities. Scott Pruitt, the race car driver? No, that's not who they're talking about. Yeah, that's not who. They're talking about somebody in Oklahoma. He alleges Steve Mnuchin made false statements about the conduct of a bank he ran before he was Treasury Secretary. I wonder, how is Steve Mnuchin doing these days? Has anybody heard from Steve Mnuchin? I haven't thought about him in a little while. Scott Besson's doing a great job. All right, the four comparators. I like Steve Mnuchin too, by the way. I thought he did a great job as well. All right, the four comparators allegedly made misleading statements during their confirmation hearings about actions they took before serving as agency heads. Is there anything else in here I want to grab? Because I'm feeling like I've spent over 2 hours on this filing, and I feel like we've given it its due, and we've extracted from it the most interesting bits. And I'm about ready to close out this episode and show you a couple bloopers that occurred before I recorded it. It might become a new thing. When I close out shows, I show you bloopers. Yep. I think we're done with it, guys. Okay. I think we got out of it what we came to get out of it, right? I think we did. There's Hercules. Hercules, how you doing? Hercules. How you doing? Are you done taking a nap? He had a good nap. Athena's right behind me. So you can't see her. She's at the I gotta remember not to back my chair up. Okay. Thank you for being here with me for that very long reading, and would have been another hour or more if I had actually gone page by page through every single page of it, all 48. But we all know why we came to it. We came to it for some of the points the filing made, but really to dine out on the exhibits that were there, and they delivered. That was very interesting, and see how much more they come up in the rest of the case. So this, I think what I'm going to do, because this took so long, I'm going to make this, of course, it's going to be the main feature of the episode, but I'm thinking it might be the only feature in this episode. You guys are going to know by the time you reach this. So, all right, thank you very much for being here and listening to me go through that. I'm going to add on it's like a minute and a half of some bloopers I had in beginning to record this episode. And I got the idea bloopers always happen when I start recording episodes. I usually do a mic check and I go back and listen to myself to see if I sound any less professional than I usually do. And my wife was on the other side of the room. Her studio, this is my studio, my wife's studio is over there. And she could hear me and she was laughing at me. And then later I showed him to my son and he laughed at him, and my wife just said, you should put those, like, leave those in. And I liked that idea. So I decided that I was gonna put them at the end of the show as bloopers, and maybe that'll become a thing. So let me know what you guys think about it, if you like that. And also let me know, I'd really like to know your thoughts on this filing and on the exhibits. I would like your thoughts on them. I'd also like how should I say this? Well, I guess I'll just say, I do hope that you guys assess that I did a fair job with this filing. and that I gave it as fair of a treatment as I gave Comey's motion, and that I furthermore I hope that through all of the filings in this case, that it's coming across that I'm taking them in as they come and trying to decipher them. And while I do have my own opinions about people in the case and about the filings, and I have my thoughts on them, I hope that you consider that I'm doing a fair job with it all. And I'm not just trying to read into it what I want to be there, and that my own biases and my own thoughts about it and my opinions aren't skewing my coverage of the case. That would be my hope. Because as far as that goes, that is a way in which I would like to stand apart from the way others cover it. Yeah, that's something I would like to aspire to, is that my coverage stands apart from others, and that I do give it a fair treatment, and I am earnestly going at each filing and considering each filing fairly. So, and with an inquisitive mind, and an aim to get towards the truth and to see justice for everyone involved. Yeah, I'm about to wax poetic, and I should stop. All right, so thank you. Y'all be positive, stay blessed, bless one another, be righteous to one another, and stay human. I'll see you on the next episode, and let's let the bloopers roll. Armed with criminal... Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah. Armed with criminal referrals from both DNI Tulsi Gabbard and CNI. All right, United States v. Comey. Let's update. That's right, Hercules. I know. That's what I'm saying. There for an hour and a half, roughly, past the normal close of the federal court that day. They returned a 2-count. Okay, I'm going to make a video now. You guys good with that? I got to make an update video. Is that okay? Can I do that now, please? Please, can I make a video? Yeah, I know. I know. You don't care about the James Comey case. I know. Are you ready? I'm going to make it now. You ready? Okay. Here we go. Here we go. I am back with you with an update in United States v. James Comey. All right, I think I have the dog's approval to go ahead.